And here we are, Season 8. If this is your first time with us, welcome. And if you've been with us since the beginning, hey, we love to see it. Thank you so much for checking us out as we look at one of the last seasons of the Fox era. It's hard to believe we've covered so much ground so fast, but the season is definitely the beginning of the end. It's around this time that viewership started to drop, and one could argue there's quite a few episodes that were, if not divisive, just didn't have the same appeal as the earlier seasons. So, what worked? What failed? What gimmicks will we see this season? It's never too late to cover Season 8, so let's dive on in. Love, AD Style, has a very interesting mix of stories. The A story follows Roger turning Roger's place into a piano lounge, and when he hears Hayley singing in the vents, he hires her to sing at the club, and quickly, obsessively falls in love with her. The B story follows Stan trying to sell his SUV that has a blue book of $10K for 15 grand, all while Jeff is on an Alaskan boating show trying to survive. The episode isn't skippable for one reason and one reason alone: Rachel McFarland's singing. This episode feels like it was made as just a showcase for her talents, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that this far into the series, but all the elements around the club scenes just feel unfinished. That being said, the club scenes themselves are terrific. They're obviously making a very dedicated reference to the Fabulous Baker Boys, starring Bo and Jeff Bridges, and I don't know, again, these could have just been static shots that didn't really do anything, but they take the time to add new camera angles and sweeping shots, and it feels like there was actual love put into the animation. Much like the creativity shown in Flirting with Disaster, the fact that American Dad is willing to experiment with all this, even in episodes that you would otherwise write off, is incredible. The Stan B story doesn't really go anywhere and just kind of spins its wheels. The Roger stuff is more uncomfortable than anything, but you can tell they really did put a lot of care into the episode, just not into all of it. It's not the best, it's not the worst, but Hayley singing makes it like a 7.5 out of 10. The family goes on vacation because Francine is tired of Stan working all the time. However, when she finds out that Stan is working on vacation and has to unalive their activities director, played by, and I'm going to mutilate this, Peter Serafinowicz, instead of stopping him, she decides to help him so that they can get it over with. We also get a B story of Hayley and Jeff losing the spark in their marriage and doing anything to get it back, including swinging, and a C story where Steve leaves the kids club with a very charismatic boy who he can't just stop listening to, even if it means he keeps getting injured. The boy played by Rupert Grint of Harry Potter fame. There's also a D story of Roger as an old woman dating an older man who ends up cheating on him/her, and yeah, I gotta be honest, Love AD Style felt like a half-baked episode that was almost rushed out. But Killer Vacation? Now that feels like an American Dad episode. We get 4 stories that all have an appropriate amount of time for their individual narratives, and each one lands pretty well, all things considered. Killer Vacation feels like what the season premiere should have been, and then just have Love AD Style sandwiched somewhere later in the season. However, it's very obviously a Valentine's Day episode, and it's meant to have a lot more inherent charm to it. I don't hate Love AD Style, I just feel like Killer Vacation is where it should have started. Killer Vacation feels like the first proper episode of the season, and it hammers home everything that makes it work so far. Killer Vacation is a very competent 9 out of 10. Can I Be Frank With You seems very unsuspecting at first, but it's a very special episode that even has a special appearance by Jon Hamm playing Jon Hamm. Don't be a hero, folks. Anyway, Francine is tired of Stan hanging out with the CIA crew constantly and wants to hang out with him too, so Roger develops a suit for her to be able to pretend to be Frank, who Bullock becomes suspicious of as she and Stan begin to bond. Ultimately, Stan has to take out Frank, and when he discovers it's Francine, he tries to explain why he needs separate time away from the family. Now, you've seen the episode before, if only in principle, but the B story? Now that's where the magic is. See, Snot's uncle is a music producer who wants Steve and the boys to be in a band. Only it's not any ordinary band. This is B12, a 12-boy band that is ready to take the world by storm. Until a band with 13 boys is introduced and Snot's uncle unalives himself. B12 is a terrific little iconic B story That adds to an overall entertaining episode. It's nice to see Bullock being jealous for a change, and you actually kind of get a sense of friendship and camaraderie at the CIA hangout space, and even seeing Francine just desperate to hang out with Stan as Frank is really kind of charming. Now, of course, obviously Stan still cares about Francine, he just likes having that bit of separation. And it's a very respectable episode. It's not as great as Killer Vacation, even with the memorable moments and the John Hamm scene, which is amazing. It really does elevate the episode as a whole. But Can I Be Frank With You is a very respectable 8 out of 10. After Stan's stepdad Hercules dies, his mom moves in with the family since she couldn't afford to live on her own, despite her desire to. She moves into Roger's attic, and Stan proceeds to attempt to kick him out, claiming he's not nearly as close a family as his mom, which, fair. The B-story finds Steve and the gang going on one of their famous hikes and encountering a crashed plane. Inside, they find a dead writer and the script for a new Fast and the Furious movie, but don't think it's real due to how many gay undertones it has. Later being shown that's where the movies get their intense action from. When Roger and Stan's mom begin to fight, they eventually fall in love and get hitched, making Roger Stan's new stepdad, and he takes on the role in a delightful way. The two begin to rebuild an old car together, and he helps him mow his lawn. However, Stan finds documents on the upstairs computer that he and his mom are going to Niagara Falls, where it appears Roger is going to unalive her. He races to save his mom, only to discover it was his mom trying to kill Roger for the life insurance money, so that she could finally live on her own. I actually really enjoy American Stepdad. It's nice to see a story where Roger isn't the active antagonist against Stan or the family, and we actually get to see the two of them bonding. The B story is fine, and I think it fits the boys really well that they go through something like that. The whole episode just feels right. It feels familiar. And it's almost a feel-good episode of American Dad, where sure, there may be some animosity, but it's still sweet to see Stan ultimately having that bonding with Roger that he needed to have with someone in a parental role. American Stepdad is a solid 9 out of 10. Stan is upset at how close Steve and Snot are and is determined to split them up, even going so far as to put Snot into witness protection. However, while in Witsec, Stan begins to bond with Snot and starts to understand why he and Steve have such a deep-rooted friendship, ultimately leaving Stan to reunite the two. The B story, however, has Jeff working for Roger in what I think might be our first Roger and Jeff story, which is an outstanding touch and something we will get plenty of down the line. However, this story finds Jeff working for Roger for some extra cash inside the house. But on his way home down the hall, he's assaulted by Roger in disguise. It's never quite clear if Jeff knows it's Roger that's mugging him over and over again, but the way they portray literally a hallway as a dilapidated neighborhood riddled with crime is just so American Dad. Jeff is mugged again and again, with Roger getting more and more violent each time until Jeff finally stands up for himself and takes matters into his own hands. Why Can't We Be Friends really hangs on if you like Snot as a character or not. If you find him annoying, you'll find this episode just drags on for entirely too long. Personally, I get it. The air guitar scenes drag, the sleepover scene is almost 3 minutes long, and it just feels like they were padding rather than doing anything substantial. The episode is saved by the B story, which, yes, could probably be inserted into any other episode, but I'm very glad it's in this one, because I lit up every time Jeff and Roger were on screen. It's nice going from Jeff being a somewhat relevant character to a main cast member over the history of the show, and while this season will challenge that, it's still a nice touch. Why Can't We Be Friends is a 7 out of 10. Steve's babysitter frankly has the worst luck imaginable, and we follow her escapades as she gets injured in a soccer game and then gets infected, and so anyway, she can't babysit Steve, so Stan and Francine can go to their horse show. Haley offers to babysit Steve instead, and they reluctantly agree. Steve overhears Haley mocking him, and so he and the boys are determined to go to a popular kids' party by procuring alcohol from a druggie played by Charlie Day. The B story follows Roger as a carriage driver trying to get Stan and Francine to the show while taking the carriage on the highway, and hijinks ensue. Eventually, Haley apologizes, Steve has to drive them home, he forgets to give a receipt to Charlie Day's character, yada yada yada, and yeah, that's the episode. I'm really not trying to skip through the episode, but it's very much just a play on the babysitting movies of the 80s and 90s, with just as many dark twists as possible. If you enjoyed those kinds of movies in that era, they're going to be really funny references. There's, references to Don't Tell Mom the Babysitter's Dead and The Babysitter's Club. There's evidence of there being a lot of jokes and different elements to the episode. The performances are solid. It's just, I don't know. Adventures in Hayleysitting just doesn't work for me. It's a very middle of the road 5 to 6 out of 10. Francine was stuck in a well when she was a baby and it became a national headline. A firefighter went down to retrieve her and never came back up, but he saved her in the process. Francine begins to feel survivor's guilt about the incident and feels like she hasn't accomplished anything with her life worth the sacrifice that Henry Watkins made for her. However, she discovers he's still alive at the bottom of the well and gets him out to return him to his old home. Henry Watkins is actually played by Will Forte, who makes his return to the show, as does Nick Kroll. The B story follows Roger and Stan trying to develop male stripper shoes so men have shoes that they can look hot in, even going to a cobbler to have them custom made. They then go to Toshi's dad for funding, which is actually going to be a pretty frequent thing going forward, and it's kinda weird they keep pushing Hideki into the forefront. Like with Jeff, it feels natural. With Hideki, it feels like they knew they had a character that could work, and they just wanted to use someone they'd already established over some new wacky character. Over time, I think this works better as they flesh out more of why Hideki is so eccentric, but it's a pretty rough first outing with him. Francine eventually learns that so long as she's happy and proud of the life she's lived and the family that she's grown, that's good enough for the man that gave up his life to save her. He then dives back into the hole and Hideki takes Stan and Roger's idea as his own. It's a very American Dad episode, but I think it's important because it shows that Francine has human emotions. It shows her grappling with survivor's guilt, which is very, very heavy for a cartoon like American Dad. It's melodramatic in parts and steadily creeps that line that we'll see the TBS era cross more than a few times. And it does work for Francine's character, but honestly, having Henry surviving and being this really weird and awkward character kind of brings the episode as a whole down. Overall, the episode is a 7 to an 8 out of 10. It's the Lent episode! Francine wants everyone to give something up for Lent to try and better each other, all while Roger throws a giant Mardi Gras rager at Roger's place. Bullock hears of their deal and decides to insert himself into it. Whoever breaks their Lent promise first will lose a finger. Meanwhile, after a drunken night of debauchery, Roger only has a single pasty to remind him of his Mardi Gras match, Made in Heaven, and begins his royal quest to find the fair maiden to whomst it belongs. He travels across the land with Klaus, his squire, trying to find the fair bosom it fits upon. The Smith family begins sabotaging one another to get each other to break first so they can go back to their Lent promises. Eventually, Francine stepping up to lose the finger since she had already lost her respect for the family. The family then coming together to save her from her fate. The B story continues until Roger finds an enchanted fairy tale cottage and, yeah, pasty belonged to an actual cow. I don't care if I spoil this. If you think on it for even a second, like that's the obvious, dumbest, most Roger answer to the whole equation. It's a frickin' cow. On the one hand, I want to be mad about it. On the other, it's an alien and a fish going around to find who a pasty fits after a Mardi Gras party. It's so surreal, it works. This episode is really elevated by the presence of Patrick Stewart as Avery Bullock. I know Bullock has been in tons of previous episodes and he's going to keep showing up even in the most recent ones, but just seeing how wild he is in this episode really helps it bring it home. Like if it were anyone else, it would feel out of place, sort of the opposite of the Hideki in the last episode. I really enjoy Fingerlinting Good, and I think it's probably one of the strongest Francine episodes since Vacation Goo or even White Rice. She's also just gotten a ton more stories lately, and it really works due to Wendy Schall's incredible talent. Fingerlinting Good is a solid 8.5 out of 10. Roger's graduating college! The only problem being he transferred all his credits from a fake college where he was also the dean. The only person that comes to celebrate him is Francine, and everyone points out that his victories and trophies are worthless because he didn't earn any of them. He then pretends to train for a marathon, cheats to win, and abuses Francine's kindness, causing her to stop caring about him. This causes Roger to double down on an archaeological dig site and attempts to convince her he's found a lost civilization. The B story follows Steve needing to ask Stan questions for a report, but when he refuses to talk to him in person, he opens up hauntingly over the phone. Cuba Gooding Jr. is played by Wayne Brady, who reappears in the show after his performance as Tunji in Ricky Spanish. It's another one of those there isn't much to the story because it's meant to be bare bones to get to the jokes. Unlike, say, a Family Guy episode where you usually have the opening shenanigans that one way or another lead into the actual plot, American Dad will do these episodes where it's a very simple episode idea, but just jam-packed with quality jokes and scenes. Like the Steve B story with Stan has some of the most quotable, haunting moments in American Dad history, but the story itself is just kind of, you see it coming a mile away. You know the points that it's going to hit. I don't have much to say about the episode proper other than it being one of the best Roger and Francine episodes, and the B story is one of the strongest because of how dark it is. The Adventures of Twill Ongenbone is easily a 10 out of 10 episode that hits all the notes it needs to hit while still presenting that absurdity we've come to expect, but in a much more digestible way. It may very well be the best episode of the entire season, and I'm here for it. Blood Crieth Unto Heaven is one of the most experimental and delightful episodes of American Dad ever. It's a play loosely based off Stan's childhood trauma with interludes presented by a live-action Patrick Stewart. I don't want to get into the story of the episode too much because I think it should be seen and appreciated, but what makes this episode so special is how committed they are to the joke that it's literally a play. Cheap props, wild characterizations of familiar players, and just this overall air of thespian charm exudes itself from the episode that could have just easily been a traditional American Dad episode. I love this. I love how experimental it is. I love how it delivers on the jokes and how right from the intro they are committed to it just being a play and the dialogue slipping. I mean, it's just, man, I love this episode. 10 out of 10. Must watch. Don't skip. Just watch and enjoy. This is what makes American Dad so special. This is an episode that showcases the magic of the show. Where Family Guy would just make a ton of movie references and laugh at their own jokes, American Dad takes the time to put on a play. Venture Brothers didn't do it. Dr. Katz didn't do it. There's such a clever charm to the episode that is just... I'm sorry, I'm gushing, but the first time I saw this episode, I was confused and bewildered, but as I've gotten older, I've become almost enchanted by it. Like, we've gotten so cynical about adult animation and things like Hoops or Brickleberry, and I don't think we celebrate these kinds of episodes enough. My God, I'll sing the praises of Blood Crieth Unto Heaven for years before I talk about Hoops for a second. It's one of the main reasons I wanted to make these videos in the first place. How many other animated series can you think of that actually put on a whole play? Not a musical episode, I mean an actual honest-to-God play. I've seen hundreds upon hundreds of shows, and just none stand out like American Dad. I just wish more people could see and experience the magic at the core of this amazing show. And so, in case you lost it in the sauce, Blood Crieth Unto Heaven is a brilliant, hilarious 10 out of 10. Mariah Carey is in this episode. Mariah Carey. Yeah, that Mariah Carey. She's in a very small role as the replacement waitress, but she's here. Anyway, Stan complains about money and Roger reveals one of his personas, Max Jets, is getting out of prison soon and he's super rich. The family then begin clamoring for the rich Uncle Max Jets' money when he falls in love with a waitress who only loves his money, and the family plans on taking him out before she can marry him and take the money they think is rightfully theirs, only to find out that Roger was going to take out Max Jets as Jerry Jets and take the money that he would inherit and run off with Gina the waitress. Yeah, like, all I want for Christmas is you, Mariah Carey. I can't emphasize enough how weird that is. Blood Crieth Unto Heaven, not a single new guest star. Max Jets, Mariah frickin' Carey for like 20 seconds. It's wild. I'm sorry. It's just, yeah, Mariah Carey is in this episode. There's really not much to talk about it. It almost feels like a paint-by-numbers episode. It kind of drags the waitress joke on for too long, but it really does exemplify Roger kind of keeping the money in his persona's like lineage. He's passing it on to himself, and it almost kind of gives him an excuse for why he's been around for so long and how he has personas that can sort of pass on to one another. But that's me giving this episode way more credit than it deserves. That's me going in depth on an episode that's really just, I don't know. It's the Smith family having one of those times where they're all just the worst again, and they have a justified reason for being that way. They all feel that Roger being horrible to them justifies them to getting the money that one of his personas might have when he feels he should unalive that persona. It's like, yeah, that kind of makes sense, but where's the joke? Where's the elements that make it better? And it just doesn't really deliver on any of them. I don't know. Max Jets featuring Mariah Carey, which I still can't get over. It's like a 5 out of 10 episode. It's fine. Look, Naked to the Limit one more time is not a great episode. Jeff is an idiot. He is so dumb. The dumbest. And in a way, it's endearing, right? In a way, it's almost like a Who's On First, but with just Jeff. Jeff has that Labrador stoner energy that just makes him likable. And I think that's largely in part to Jeff Fisher knowing how to play the character. Like, he does a great job playing a burnout without them feeling like they're a waste of space. Anyway, when he finds out Roger's an alien and starts blabbing about it, Stan decides either Jeff or Roger needs to be unalived. The B story? Oh, why, it's Steve hasn't gotten his ass yet and starts packing ham in his pants to show he's got some premium buns on display. Doesn't sound like much of an episode, right? Feels like they're gonna have an actual conclusion that rewrites everything and we can all go back to the way things are, right? Nope. Roger calls home, an alien ship comes for him, and he pushes Jeff inside a tractor beam, and he is the one taken away. Jeff's gone. He's been abducted. It won't be the last we see of Jeff, but this is one of the few episodes that actually has consequences. Other than this important plot point, though, the episode as a whole is just kind of okay. It's like a 6 out of 10 that doesn't do anything. There's even a send-off clip show for Roger as he makes peace with Going and then just, yeets Jeff in instead of him. Like, that's the point. That's obviously the subversion of expectations. I have to wonder if the Brian Dies Family Guy event had some inspiration for this, where they, take Brian out of the story for, I think, like 3 episodes, and people got tattoos. It was like, Brian is dead, rest in legend, you absolute G, and it's a dog with a martini glass in it. I think that might have been poking fun at it, but I don't know, obviously. I don't have that kind of ESPN to figure that out. But yeah, no, this entire thing could have just been avoided if Roger listened to Stan. It would have been so easy. But no, they got rid of Jeff. Rip, you tubular dude. Hey, remember Tearjerker from like 5 seasons ago? It's a sequel episode! This time, Agent Smith has to square off against Black Villain, who is just Principal Lewis, and look, I'm not gonna lie to you, Tearjerker is the better of the 2 episodes. For Black Eyes Only just feels like it coasts from scene to scene, where Tearjerker felt like a solid narrative. It's confusing, like I don't understand what happened to For Black Eyes Only. It feels like there was an idea. It feels like there is something deeper there than what we got. And instead, it just feels like it's a bunch of references to like the Daniel Craig era of James Bond, and they're not like full-on jokes either. It's very subtle nods. It's not bad. It's got Octavia Spencer in it, but it's just kind of like, that's it. It doesn't feel like much of a James Bond parody as much as it does a quick joke pull where they're just shotgunning as many jokes out as possible and going, ha 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 ha, this is comedy. It's like the Roger Moore of Bond parodies. I don't know. The episode is like a 6 out of 10. I wish I had more to say about it. It's a frustrating episode. It's not the worst episode of the season. It's not horrid at all. It's just like a nothing episode. It's like an uneventful episode. Sandra Oh reprises her role as Toshi's mom. That's still wild to me. She does a phenomenal job. Anyway, Francine and Hiko get into a contest to see who's more talented, Steve or Akiko. The B story has Stan and Roger fighting over badminton while Hayley deals with Jeff being taken by aliens, going through the 5 stages of grief. Stan and Roger decide to speedrun her through the 5 stages of grief so that they can have a line judge. Francine discovers that Steve is exceptional at spelling, as is Akiko, and the two enter the spelling bee while also crushing on one another. It's like they aged Akiko up to make it a functional idea, but then, yeah, the two decide to throw the spelling bee to support one another, and Francine and Hiko agree that their child's happiness is more important. It's a very bizarre episode that just runs with all kinds of jokes as fast as it can, and the shocking thing is, a lot of them stick. Like, I don't revisit this chunk of episodes frequently, but Spelling Bee My Baby has a lot of charm and very sharp comedic timing. Like, Scott Grimes and Wendy Shaw play off of each other incredibly well in this episode, and there's just a lot of really quick jabs and gags that if you don't pay attention, you'll miss them. But if you're paying attention, if you have those eagle eyes, you're going to keep getting joke after joke after joke after joke after joke, and it's almost like a blizzard of comedy. It's worth seeing it if you've never seen it before. It's a solid 8 out of 10 that I cannot defend enough. Like, I went into Spelling Bee My Baby going, oh, I don't watch this episode a lot, it's not that good, and then walking out of it like, oh my, this is actually really funny, and why doesn't Francine deliver these jokes as frequently? It almost felt more like a TBS era episode than it did a Fox episode. I would expect this out of season 18 more than I would season 8 or season 9 or season 7. This is much more that new style of American Dad. Not to say that it's bad. Again, new seasons of American Dad are just as good, if not better, than the old seasons. It's wild to me. I really like this episode, and you should definitely give it a chance. I don't know how to feel about the missing kink. Look, here's the B story of it. Snot gets to date Hayley since Jeff is gone, they go on a date, and then he gets miserable and depressed because he liked the chase and not the actual act of dating Hayley. See, isn't that, cut and dry? Know what isn't? The A story. Francine feels like Stan isn't adventurous in the bedroom. She wants him to be more aggressive, and so when Steve is punished with a spanking, she volunteers to take his punishment for him, eventually sabotaging him just so she could be punished in his stead, all leading up to her helping Stan discover his kinks through a musical number that also has Mariah Carey in it. Mariah Carey, are you a fan of American Dad? I need to know your thoughts. I need to come on the show. I will talk to you. Why are you in multiple episodes in one season? Marguerite also returns. Not as impressive as Mariah Carey. That's just, what? I don't get it. Basically, Stan comes up with a whole new kink experience and learns it's okay to have a kink. I don't know. It's a complicated episode. I'm gonna give it a 7 out of 10 and move on. Like, okay, you know what saves the episode? The whole kink showcase that Principal Lewis and Marguerite just watch in abject horror. Much like Spelling Bee My Baby, the jokes are there and they're solid, but also, it's a wild episode. Like, I have to wonder if these episodes are why American Dad got put not necessarily on the chopping block, but definitely the red flag for broadcast television. These are episodes that, again, you expect from the freedom of the TBS era, but this is very much still Fox. This is coming on after The Simpsons and Bob's Burgers and Family Guy, and then you have an episode where Stan is figuring out his kink, and it's a showcase of all the most niche elements out there. Like, I don't know. I feel like it's a very tricky episode to navigate around. Francine runs into her friend, and when she sees Stan go wild singing Taking Care of Business, not only does she try and make sure she avoids him, she tries to turn him into a bland, normal husband, and when he gets concussed on a mission to Doug and Buster's, she sees her opportunity. The B story has Steve working for Roger as a paperboy and sees how he plays the system. It doesn't really do anything. It just ends with Francine being a horrible person that manipulated Stan into being something he isn't, and Steve and Roger not really accomplishing anything. It's the definition of a do-nothing episode, which is such a shame. The season has become such a mixed bag where you have some of the best and innovative episodes, and just some of the most boring episodes that are just kind of there. I don't know. This is like a 5 out of 10. I don't want to go lower out of kindness for Wayne Brady killing it again, and some of the jokes are still really solid. But when the core story just isn't that great, the jokes can't save it. It's disappointing, but, you know, the season is not bad. Overall, it is not pound for pound the worst season of the show. I don't even honestly know which one that would be. There can be arguments for which season of Simpsons or Family Guy is the worst, but outside of like season 1 or 2 being the worst of American Dad, there's never like that significant drop where the whole show has fallen apart because of it. The Boring Identity is just boring. The Doug and Buster scene is great. The Navajo part is fantastic, but overall, it's just, yeah, it's there. It has a pulse, I guess. It's whatever. The CIA is concerned Bullock is losing it as he starts to mentor Stan and gives him more than questionable advice. The B story has Steve getting a new bully, Louise, played by John Leguizamo. That's right, Bruno from Encanto is in this episode, and nothing else. You pull up John Leguizamo's IMDb and you'll find like 233 entries that are literally just Bruno from Encanto. Anyway, Stan tries to protect Bullock from being decommissioned, and Steve runs to Roger for help with his new bully and basically gets Stelio to beat Steve up so Louise won't want to, and then Louise and Stelio Cantos team up to beat Steve up with Roger's help. The episode is kind of saved by Stan just genuinely caring about his boss, and Patrick Stewart does a great job like always, but then of course they rip the carpet out from under you. The episode is just one giant subverted expectation. All in all, it's, you know, it would probably be like a 6 or a 7 out of 10. It has some talent, it has some charm, but the episode just kind of drags in parts. Remember when Jeff got sent to space? American Dad does. This episode is just a Jeff episode. Jeff is on the alien saucer and has to find a way home to Haley. However, the saucer is shaped like a mall. Michael McKean plays Emperor Zing, a former lover of Roger's who runs the ship like a ruthless dictator that proves love isn't real. Jeff is determined to prove him wrong and wins his way back home with the help of Sinbad, played by Sinbad. He's brought before the council where they summon the Majestic by playing Wax Fang's Majestic, which is a smooth jam. Jeff proves that the Majestic only shows the darker events and relationships and intentionally avoids showing the romantic moments under Zing's orders. Jeff and Sinbad manage to escape, with Sinbad becoming a Force ghost as they get on a ship and fly off trying to find a way home from galaxies far, far away. I know I speed ran through the plot of the episode, but it's not bad at all. As standalone episodes go, it's actually one of the strongest and definitely one of the best episodes of the season. Jeff Fisher really gets time to just be Jeff, and we get to see a lot more of him than we had before. Sinbad is great in the episode, and it really just kind of works. I enjoy Lost in Space, and I'd be lying if I said that it didn't get me into Wax Fang, which just absolutely kudos to American Dad for having a phenomenal soundtrack. It's just, like, the fact that this episode just focused on Jeff, who had been a side character up until, like, a season ago, has such heart, such charm, which, again, I know I keep saying this, but, like, Family Guy would never. Simpsons would never. Not only are they giving a character a side arc in an area where no other characters are going to properly interact with them, it's a fun, emotional, and well-deserved 10 out of 10 episode. Here we are, the Season 8 finale, Da Flippity Flop. Remember when Klaus was an Olympic skier before his brain got put into a fish? American Dad does. Anyway, they find Klaus's original body, and Klaus desperately wants to be put back into his old body so he could show off Da Flippity Flop, a ski technique downright deadly for anyone less skilled than himself. Stan refuses for no real reason other than it being a hassle, and Klaus gets super depressed until Stan finally agrees to put him back into his original body, only it's decayed to the point it's falling apart, so Klaus decides to put himself into Stan's body, and Stan into his fish body, and so he can see how bad of a life he really had. Stan has to then get Klaus's decaying body to stop him from doing the ultimate ski technique and save his own life. It's a weird one. The B story, though? Roger turns the attic into a gym and tries very, very, very aggressively to get Steve to sign up. It's incredible. It's one of the best B stories in the entire season, maybe even the entire show, just because of how nonsensical and yet relatable it is. It feels like a Brian and Stewie episode from early in Family Guy, but with the absurdist humor that American Dad does so well. The B story is great. There's some good points to the A story, don't get me wrong, but overall the A story is almost a letdown in comparison. It's like a 7 out of 10, all things considered. It's kinda odd that this is the season finale. I just personally feel like Lost in Space would have made for a better finale episode, since it continued the Jeff storyline and actually put some hope for the future at the end. The Flippity Flop doesn't feel like Tears of a Clooney, Joint Custody, or even Great Space Roaster. It just feels like it's kinda there, which seems to be a problem with quite a few episodes of this season. They just didn't know where to put them, what episodes would work in the best order. Honestly, even just saying that, the Flippity Flop does have a lot of good jokes, it has a lot of good charm, and I think 7 out of 10 might be too harsh on it. Bicep Crow easily pushes it to like an 8.5 out of 10. And there we go! That is Season 8, everybody! How did you like Season 8? Anything you think I was wrong on? What were your favorite episodes? Least favorite? Let me know in the comments below. Season 8 truly was a mixed bag of sorts. We had some terrific episodes like Blood Crieth Unto Heaven, Lost in Space, and Twill Ongnenbone, and we had some absolute struggle bus episodes like The Boring Identity. It's kind of disappointing to see this fluctuation again after having so many just superbly strong and well-balanced seasons one after another. Now that being said, you could have absolutely loved episodes I wasn't a fan of, and you're totally valid for liking or hating whatever episodes you do. That's part of the charm to American Dad, but this season just seemed too random for the sake of random overall. We have just one more season before we're at the end of the Fox era, just 23 more episodes before we switch over to the TBS era. And it's surreal to think that we're so close to this major turning point in the history of American Dad. And so, like always, thank you so much for joining me on this little adventure. And remember, we have a Discord, Twitch, Twitter, and Patreon you can join, and we're always excited to see what you guys think of these videos. So let's salute American Dad and see if it leaves the Fox era like a fine wine in Season 9. See you next time, folks.